Welcome back into this Week 7 preview edition of Inside the Huddle here on High School Cube News. Brian Chimino with Mike Clark of the Sun-Times, Beth Long of Fox Sports, and Scout.com. The Simeon Wolverines have emerged as the favorite in the Illini Redbird, but they're going to have a real tough game here in Week 7 against a dual-threat quarterback. We're talking about Demario Harris from Dunbar.
The interesting thing is that last year he was really more of a running back and played some receiver as well, but they kind of needed a quarterback this year. He's stepped up. He's a dual-threat guy. He's also a state champ in track, just like his brother was, so it's going to be interesting to see which path he goes in college. I talked a little bit to Coach Glenn Johnson at Dunbar, and it looks like Demario might be leaning toward track at this point, but you know, he's certainly a player and a prospect on the football side too.
Absolutely, and coming from a former college track athlete, his track times are absolutely fast enough to be running in college. In the state 3A track meet, he ran a 10.83 to win the 100, and he ran a 21.6 to win the 200, and that is fast for interview trackies out there. But anybody who has that kind of speed, that's what college football coaches look for, because you can't teach speed, as the saying goes. You can teach him how to play football. Obviously, he can play football. He's done a great job this season, but it really wouldn't surprise me to see him get some interest.
CaryGrove's closest game of the season was Week 1, where they knocked off Wheaton North by 10 points. This week they'll face Jacobs, who's 4-1, and Jacobs got rolled in Week 1 against Barrington 37-0, but since then they haven't lost, and they've been killing people, Mike.
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting matchup. Obviously, Jacobs has one of the top coaches in the state, and Bill Mitz, who had a tremendous run at Stevenson before moving over to Jacobs and kind of reviving that program. CaryGrove has just been rolling people ever since that Wheaton North game. I mean, they had a fairly close game, I guess, against Lake Zurich. I think that was 24-7, but you know, other than that, they've just been very dominant on both sides of the ball.
We featured Trevor Ruland, one of their offensive linemen who's headed to Notre Dame, as the MVP a few weeks ago, and one of the things he said in that interview was, teams know exactly what we're going to do. We're going to run the ball down their throats. That's what we do. We don't change our game plan. It doesn't matter. They know exactly what they're going to do. And CaryGrove always has a few prospects. This year, Ruland's one of the top ones they've had in a couple seasons.
Preseason #1 Bolingbrook hasn't been challenged since that Week 1 loss to Hinsdale Central. They're going to get challenged this week against number 14 Homewood Flossmoor.
HF has had a couple of losses now. They lost to Lincoln Way East in a real wild one, 43-40. Then earlier they had lost in the lightning delay game to Stevenson. Bolingbrook again hasn't been challenged since Hinsdale Central. It'll be interesting to see, you know, where they're at against a good team. They've been playing some teams that, quite frankly, they've overmatched and overpowered in recent weeks. But you know, they've still got the 5 D1 kids on defense. I mean, you know, and the interesting thing about that is that one of those 5 D1 kids on defense, I guess, is playing a little bit of offense now.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, most of them seem to be getting some time on offense, but last week, Isaac Lane, who is a cornerback for Bolingbrook, scored a touchdown on offense. That seemed to be one of the biggest parts of their game plan that was kind of undetermined and undecided, was that all these defensive standouts were going to see time on the offensive side of the ball, as the Huff twins as well have had some pretty good games, who were also former MVPs on offense for the Raiders. I think possibly that maybe once those guys started getting in their sync and their groove and rhythm on offense is kind of why we've seen Bolingbrook continue to roll. So it'll be interesting to see exactly how much that helps them this weekend against a pretty impressive Homewood Flossmoor team.
And Joliet Catholic, now 5-1, has earned themselves into the Super 25, and they'll be playing a game which is probably for the East Suburban Catholic Conference Championship, and that's against Nazareth.
Joliet Catholic's a little bit different team than they've been. I mean, they've always been known for being a ground-first team, but this year they can throw the ball a little bit more, and pretty effectively too. Nazareth, as usual, has a bunch of quarterbacks, a bunch of running backs. They were really good last year. Most of those kids were back, so it's going to be interesting to see. This should be for that conference for sure.
And before we wrap up this preview edition of Inside the Huddle, Beth, weekly recruiting notes coming up.
One note about a junior actually from Bolingbrook. Tuff Borland added an offer from Wisconsin. A couple commitments as well. A flip from Jamal Brown of Phillips. He's going to head to Illinois State with his teammate Dwayne Collins. Decided after Dwayne committed that maybe Western Michigan wasn't exactly where he wanted to go. He didn't have a lot of options when he made that decision. Flipped his commitment to Illinois State, a place where he felt he could get playing time quite a bit earlier, and he fit a little bit better into the defense there. Also, John and Patrick Kilcommons from Nazareth are headed to Dartmouth. I guess academics is a bit of an obvious reason why they might have chosen Dartmouth, but 2 pieces on a very impressive Nazareth offensive line that are going to be headed to play college football.
And that'll do it for this week's edition of Inside the Huddle here on High School Cube News. Stick with the website throughout the weekend for all your results and recaps. For Mike Clark and Beth Long, I'm Brian Chimino. We'll see you next week.